Good day, you're watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jes Delos Santos, and here are today's top stories. In a bid to contain the impact of the U.S. Fed's fresh rate hike, the Bangko Sentral says it's prepared to implement another increase in policy rates. The Finance Department orders the BIR and Customs Bureau to fast-track their digitalization efforts to improve tax collection. The death toll from the magnitude 7 quake that jolted Luzon has risen to 6. The Education Department says it may need up to 940 million pesos to repair and reconstruct damaged classrooms. And office space take-up in Metro Manila continues to improve thanks to strong demand from outsourcing and traditional firms. We begin our broadcast with the Bangko Sentral saying that it is prepared to continue tightening to manage the spillover effects of the U.S. Fed's decision to raise rates for a second straight month. BSP Governor Felipe Medalla says the central bank is ready to use the full force of monetary measures to curb rising inflation and to prop up the weakening peso. The U.S. Fed earlier delivered another rate hike of 75 basis points in its ongoing battle to quell price pressures. Governor Medalla says the decision of the U.S. Fed, along with tightening global financial conditions, could continue to drive forex movements in emerging economies, including the Philippines. The Monetary Board will hold its next meeting on August 18, and Governor Medalla has already signaled a rate increase of up to 50 basis points. Recall that the BSP raised its benchmark rates by 75 bips in an off-cycle move on July 14, bringing the policy rate to 3.25%. Finance Secretary Ben Diokno has ordered the country's revenue collection agencies to fast-track their digitalization programs to improve the country's tax effort. The BIR and the Bureau of Customs began implementing digital programs to facilitate trade and make the filing and payment of taxes easier amid the pandemic. Diokno says the government is expecting these agencies to collect more revenues on the back of a faster and more broad-based economic growth. The finance chief has earlier said that he is not inclined to seek new taxes as he prefers to improve tax administration instead. Our next guest this morning is all for digitalization to fast-track processes. We have on the show Coco Alcuaz, Executive Director of the Makati Business Club. Thank you, Coco, for joining us.
Morning, Jes. Thanks for inviting us again.
Again, MBC have been busy leading up to the SONA. You met with the DOLE and the BSP. Let's start off with your discussions with BSP Chief Felipe Medalla, host of topics there, including digitalization. What struck you the most from that meeting, and what are you most hopeful about?
We've met five or six officials as of now, Jes, including Governor Medalla a week ago on Friday. The conversation with him was very broad, the broadest, I think, of all the conversations. It covered inflation, of course, and as you said, digitalization, a lot of discussion about that. In our meetings with these government officials, we bring some of our members that were relevant to the projects that the government officials want to, or the departments want to pursue. We really go into these meetings asking how we can help, and then we bring members of ours who are relevant to that. And as a result of that, there are some action points that that were kind of agreed on that we should pursue. A lot of them, as you said, are in the digitalization space.
Now, talking about digitalization here, would you say that's enough, at least as a point here, when it comes to the government's anti-corruption efforts, or would you have wanted a more direct anti-corruption order from the president? Because some corners, of course, think that this was absent during the president's SONA. Would you have wanted a more concrete policy direction when it comes to that goes beyond government right-sizing?
Right. The president did mention efficiency and right sizing, which could cover corruption as well. But we would have wished, I guess that's one of the wishes that we would have had regarding this SONA, which in general we strongly supported, is that there be a more direct addressing of corruption. When you look at corruption, Jes, it's bad really for two reasons. First of all, it's unfair. It's unfair for the citizen who's waiting in line for a permit in a government agency, or for a business that's seeking an approval for an investment that could create jobs. And they're either going to pay more than they should pay, or they're not going to pay, and somebody who's willing to make the payoff gets the deal. And either way, that citizen or that business is going to be discouraged from doing more transactions that could create jobs. The government, on the other end, gets less money than it should because of the payoff there, which leads to really the other part, which you talked about in your previous story. The president shared with us a long list of great plans, and we support many of those plans, I think, in general. The problem is always, how do you pay for these things? And as you said, Secretary Diokno already said he's not really in favor of raising taxes. They talk about revenue neutral taxation. One place you can get this money is by attacking corruption. There have always been a wide range of estimates of how much is lost to corruption, both on the collection side and the spending side. And if that money is captured, it's really the government's money. It should be recaptured rather. That could pay for some of these services that the president is talking about.
Now, more on that point, you have the finance chief now, Secretary Diokno, is pointing out in the past again that he is not in favor of imposing new taxes. But on the other hand, you have President Marcos during the SONA at least signaling the possibility of imposing taxes on digital services. What do you make of that?
I'm not privy to their discussions, and I'm not an economist either. There are reasons there are pros and cons to all of these tax proposals. Digital, for one, the theory behind that is the brick and mortar companies are paying taxes, so why shouldn't the digital companies pay taxes as well? Some people will say that's not a new tax, it's just making sure that the tax applies to everyone fairly. It's really a question of what rate should tax a digital-based company versus a bricks and mortars company. Because they have very different cost structures, and a similar tax rate would hit them very differently, Jes.
Okay. Of course, the new administration is coming in at a time of a very challenging economic environment. For one, we're also tackling high price pressures, at the same time food security. You have Marcos also sitting in as a DA chief. Based from what you heard from the SONA, are you satisfied with the plans to ensure food security, or do you think that these policies are too long-term and may not necessarily address immediate needs?
We were very, very glad that after the president talked about macroeconomy, the first item on his list really was agriculture. And the fact that he's taken on that department, we hope, really is a signal that that department gets the attention that it deserves, and that's long been withheld from it. But we all know how critical agriculture is. We need to produce more food. We need to fix those supply chains so that you and I, the consumers, can get good food at affordable prices, especially in this global shortage / inflation / supply chain situation we're in. The other reason, of course, to attack agriculture is when you increase production and address those supply chains. And the president talks a lot from day one about supply chains. You really allow farmers to get more income from their produce. And we all know that farmers are among the poorest of all Filipinos, and this will finally enable them to improve their lives, their families' lives, and support the farm sector, which, in crises like this, we realize is really an important sector to have, and not something we can entrust fully to the world markets.
Okay, we're tackling about, of course, these food security issues affecting as well, even, of course, our labor market here when we're talking about the high inflationary environment that we have at the moment. You also sat down with Labor Secretary Benny Laguesma. You discussed work from home, labor contracting. What was your impression from that talk with Laguesma, and what do you make of his policy direction considering the tight labor market that we are in?
In all these talks with the government officials, just what we came away with, we've worked with many of these. By we I mean business sector. I may look old, and I'm not necessarily that.
Not
in the
really.
business sector, we've worked with many of these officials for a long time, and now we're talking to them, and we believe that they believe that business is not the enemy, that business is an important partner in job creation and national development. That goes as well for Secretary Laguesma. We talked a lot about, one of our main topics there was the Bpo sector and their work from home issue. We bring that issue up a lot because this sector has more than 1 million employees. It actually added about 140,000 employees during COVID. We also talked about apprenticeship, which is a way where companies can train employees and employees can get training that they can't get elsewhere. The problem with apprenticeship is that some skills take longer than 6 months to learn. And based on our laws, if you cross the 6-month mark, you have to be regularized. In many countries, they allow apprenticeship for up to 2 years. We had a very good discussion with the secretary and his undersecretary who will be in charge of this about how to make sure, how to promote apprenticeship while putting the safeguards in place so that employers or illegitimate employers can't use it as a way to just get cheap labor.
Okay, but at the same time, much of the issue here with the labor market hinges as well on lockdowns. And you have the president during the SONA saying that he's not in favor of at least enforcing any more COVID lockdowns, but cases again on the rise here yesterday. That hit above 3,000. We're also talking about a slow rollout of jabs here, even the private sector complaining about vaccine spoilage. Lockdowns, of course, will always be a bane for the business community, but have we reached that point that we are confident to say that it really won't be necessary moving forward?
I'm sure there's a range of opinions to that, but I think in general, it's reached a point where, especially now, we see how these variants of COVID have relatively less effect or short-term effects. There is still long COVID, of course, for some people than the previous variants. And I think when the president says we can't afford another one, he's really speaking from the fact that if we did that again, the kind of economic damage that the first long lockdown caused, and the long-term scarring is just not sustainable anymore. I think by now, enough people have been vaccinated. We could have done a lot better. We, and especially the government, could have done a lot better to vaccinate more. But enough people have been vaccinated, and we know the protocols so that more lockdowns should be avoided.
All right. Again, thank you very much for your insights this morning. That was Coco Alcuaz, Executive Director of the Makati Business Club. Now let's pause for a quick break, but coming right up after that. The National Commission for the Culture and the Arts says it may take 5 years to fully restore the historical sites damaged by the magnitude 7 Abra earthquake. More of that and other stories when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us. And we're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jes Delos Santos. A total of 6 people have died due to the Abra quake that jolted Luzon last Wednesday. In its latest report, the NDRRMC says 136 people have been injured following the recent quake, while 4 people remain missing. Nearly 1,600 homes were damaged by the earthquake, DepEd reports that repair works for damaged classrooms have ballooned to 940 million pesos. The cost of damage to infrastructure has risen to over 48 million pesos, while the cost of damage to agriculture is now at 3.88 million pesos. 19,486 families were affected by the Abra Earthquake. That's equivalent to more than 79,200 individuals living in 246 barangays in Region 1 and the Cordilleras. The National Commission for Culture and the Arts says it may take 5 years before they could fully restore the historical sites damaged by the Abra Earthquake. The NCCA explains the extent of damage to the sites is not yet clear. The Commission adds they also do not have enough budget to handle all repairs.
Definitely, we cannot fund all the restorations of this. The government cannot afford that. So, magkakaroon din kami ng issue ng who to prioritize, assuming na pwede naming galawin ito.
President Bongbong Marcos visited Abra, the epicenter of the magnitude 7 earthquake, to assess the extent of the damage and to assure affected residents that help will be given to them. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza with a story.
The Cordillera Administrative Region is among the areas that suffered the most damage after Wednesday's earthquake. According to the NDRRMC's latest update, 4 people have died in the Cordilleras due to the quake, while 113 people have been injured. Here in Bangged Abra, over 600 individuals have evacuated their homes following the initial earthquake on Wednesday. They are temporarily staying in the Bangged Evacuation Center. Earlier today, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. visited the site to check the situation and assure that their needs will be met.
Tinitiyak natin ni Secretary Tulfo na lahat ng pangangailangan ninyo habang kayo ay nandito pa sa evacuation center ay meron kayong maibigay ang mga pagkain, mga kung ano man ang mga kailangan pa ninyo.
Marcos Jr. also directed authorities to make sure that communications lines are kept open for evacuees as well as power and water supply remains stable. The chief executive also took the time to thank his supporters in the province. Before visiting the evacuation center, the president attended a situation briefing at Camp 1 Villamor in Bangged. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza, We Are One News.
Fitch Ratings says a significant slowdown in China's economic growth due to COVID lockdowns will also likely hurt sovereign ratings of Asia-Pacific economies, including the Philippines. The credit rater said China lockdowns will cause clear negative economic effects for Asian countries because China is the biggest export market for most of these nations. Fitch says an economic slowdown in China could cause possible credit implications through channels like trade, tourism, and financing. A China slowdown will be the third major external shock for Asian economies following the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war. Now this from the Philippine Star. Office market in Metro Manila continued to grow in the second quarter of the year. According to the latest quarterly briefing of Colliers Philippines, net absorption in the second quarter improved to 45,100 square meters. That's the highest ever recorded since the first quarter of 2020 and the second consecutive quarter of positive net office space take-up in the region. Colliers says this is mainly driven by demand from outsourcing and traditional firms. The property consultant expects office space take-up to hit 355,000 square meters this year. ABS-CBN reports that it managed to cut its debt by 14% to 18.4 billion pesos in July. The network's president and CEO Carlo Katigbak says they continue to find ways to reduce debt further to 14 billion pesos or less. For now, the broadcast giant has yet to decide whether it will seek a new franchise under the new administration. Katigbak tells ABS-CBN shareholders that the management will first evaluate if the pursuit for a new franchise aligns with their long-term strategy to explore fresh platforms, especially the digital space. And Philippine 7 is opening 300 more 7-Eleven stores in the country. To reach its goal, the company is allotting up to 2 billion pesos in capital expenditures this year. It expects half of the 300 new stores to be company-owned and the other half to be operated by third-party franchises. Recall that last year, the company opened 164 new stores and ended the year with 3,073 outlets in the country. And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We are One News, all sides, all the time. Don't go away. We'll give you the latest on the local bourse when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us. And you're still watching Businessworld Live here on One News. I'm Jes Delos Santos. Let's kick things off with the peso after it weakened almost 0.5% on Thursday before tempering the drop during close. As you can see right here in this chart, you have the peso strengthening a touch here at 55.350. That's of course after the BSP did say that it will continue to tighten its policy rates to prop up the peso and quell hot inflation. The new guidance from BSP Governor Felipe Medalla comes just after the second round of 75 BP hike from the US Fed. Following that rate hike, the main index zoomed to the 6,300 level on Wednesday. Today, though, you have the main index reversing those gains down by close to 1.1% at 6,310. Luis Limlingan of Virginia Capital says the hint of slower hikes in the next policy meeting, at least in the U.S., plus investor cheering Fed Chair Jerome Powell's statement that the U.S. has not entered recession yet. Again, the index, however, down by 1.1% to 6,310. Looking at our leaders and laggards here, let me refresh this very quickly here. A number of gainers, though a handful only, though. You have Wilcon Depot, that is up 2.6%, followed by Security Bank, also in the green at 0.9%. However, as you can see right here, Meralco losing quite huge numbers here, down by 6.4%. Another thing that traders, of course, are taking a look at would have to be earnings, and the number of those coming in early today. We had Cemex Philippines reporting a net loss of 528 million pesos in the second quarter. That resulted in a net loss of as much as 267 in the first half of the year. Net loss mainly due to foreign exchange losses as the peso weakened, higher income tax expenses as well as lower operating EBITDA. For full year, you have Cemex looking at flat to low single-digit percentage decrease in domestic cement sales amid challenging domestic economy. Looking at how Cemex is performing so far this morning, as you can see right here, it's down by 2 7/10% at 73 centavos a piece. Lastly, let's check on ABS-CBN. We reported earlier that you have Carlo Kutigbak saying that they were able to slash their debt by 14%, but also they're still mulling the possibility of applying for a franchise as they try to think of their long-term agenda, especially in the digital space. Looking at how ABS-CBN is performing so far, the stock is up 2 3/10% to 9 pesos and 38 centavos a piece. And that's it for today, July 29, 2022. Join us again Monday next week at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for your free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News Live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jes Delos Santos. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe. Philippines, we are One News. All sides, all the time.